Okay.
You guys remember the cops?
Happy 243.
Thank you so much.
They said after about a week, you should start.
These are very.
That wasn't from kicking your wall with the budget, right?
No. That was it's from beating up Chief McGee for retiring.
Yeah. Okay.
They sent him home last night. I think they got home last night about.
There's Wally.
Yeah, the pleasure of being at the meeting.
Don't do it.
Well, hopefully it's not all 6 to 11 o'clock.
That's always a win if you get to a certain, right?
Just comparing with our last meeting was like stuff that we meet up.
Shotgun Miller.
Yes, it will.
He texted me, he's like, good luck. I'm like,
The workshops during the day, just workshops. Yeah, the regular meeting.
Right there. I was, I know I was there so well.
But we do close session.
It was mom really well.
We do close session at 5. Regular meeting come out of close session at 6.
The regular meeting. Good young man. Just good.
Sure we did one.
Yeah, did he do another one or?
Oh, he's still racing.
Oh, he's still racing? I thought he gave that up.
My daughter said either race a car or you race a car. So he's trying to race.
Put it to use, right, yeah.
He won one race this past week, and then the second race, he put it into the wall.
Oh, man. Where's he racing at?
Right now, just waiting out.
Wake County Speedway. Okay.
He's running another circuit out in the Western Heights.
Kind of like I replaced.
Yeah.
I support from behind.
Yeah. That's the best.
He talks about that to this day, like, man, not doing that. Okay.
How you doing? I'm gonna say it, right? How you doing? I know, I got to hit the gavel. Terry and I were in a meeting.
Get you and Mr. Laminated. Thanks. So kind. Yes.
Oh,
Yes. How are you guys doing? Okay.
That's it right there. Brett was All right, good to see you. Good to see you.
Downstairs.
She's in our office, she's coming up.
How about the rest of the girl? Or it's. Good to see you.
See you. Okay, so there's no problem. Okay.
Thank you.
Really?
Hey.
I don't.
Good. Hey.
Presentation.
Yeah. Popular. I have a dream is. What out in there, you kitchen. That's the distracting thing. To our budget instead. Which would be like probably 100 times more than we've ever had for any budget. I don't know. It's like millions of dollars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not, again, not trying to be ugly about it, but you've advertised budget workshop today at 4 p.m.
I heard the door and it was her, so she just came back, so we'll touch base maybe afterwards.
Okay, well, the HTML version is different. So, HTML there.
Yeah, this is not the agenda.
Hey.
Hey.
Well,
I'll talk to you.
okay, all right, sounds good. We'll go ahead call the meeting to order. Thanks everybody for being here. We're now at the Town Council Budget Workshop for June 7, 2022. And we'll move forward, and I will turn it over now to Ms. Crosby.
I'm gonna turn it over to
Okay.
Mr. Purvis.
All right, Mayor, Council, thank you for meeting this evening for this budget workshop. So if we have several things on the agenda, we'll try and move through. We're going to start with some transit and S-line information. So Ms. Shannon Cox and I think Katie is a mic, and Katie Schwing is going to present on that. So that'll be the first part. And then we'll move into some ARPA information from the budget team from Mary Beth, and then personnel from Mary Beth Manville, and then I will dive into some other budget items that was the original call.
Okay. Thank you. I guess so today we will begin with some introductions. An important person to introduce you. Go through some GoApex updates. Talk a little bit about the S-line rail corridor, and then share some lessons learned from our the recent trip that Mr. Gant and I took to Florida. So first of all, introductions. Katie Schwing is standing here. She is our new senior long-range transit planner. She's actually been with us for about 6 months now, but we have not got to meet. We haven't all got to meet her. Katie went to UNC. She got her master's.
Which UNC is that? I always have to ask for the, okay. There are other UNCs I just want to add. There are.
Notes over there. Just stand up on the podium and stuff. She got her master's in urban regional planning in Virginia. She has statewide transit experience, regional transit planning experience. She has bus stop experience, transit data analysis experience, pretty much everything that she needs to do for APEX, because you're going to do it all when you're working on transit. Katie has. She's also just a pleasure to work with. She has the passion that we need here and the attention to detail. And I will tell you, we would not be getting ready to launch GoApex this summer if she was not here with us. So with that, I will turn the first part over to Katie.
And it's really nice to meet you today. I'll give a very brief update on GoApex before I turn it over to Shannon. So when we're talking about launching GoApex, we're really talking about launching a suite of the first of which, just to pressure, is the fixed route circulator, which is, as you can see, I'm not going to go into detail about it, you probably think, but based on previous way that you're running hourly from 6 a.m. to Saturday. And this is partially funded through local funding, partially through the funding area. And along with that service, we're also launching GoApex Doors, which is a federally required 88-hour transit service, which is eligibility based, and that's for folks who have a disability that prevents them from using transit service. And they'll be able to reserve rides that have origins and destinations anywhere within 3/4 of a mile of the fixed routing, so that orange area. And that's going to be operated through a service agreement with GoApex, which you might already see operating in the area. And those vehicles are going to be continuing to operate under the GoApex branding for the vehicle. And that is to really allow them the flexibility, because this is a demand response service and the demand varies day to day.
Do folks sign up for that?
There's an eligibility application that they have to fill out that we'll actually be posting fairly soon on our website as soon as we get the launch date announced. And there are pretty standardized questions that are asked as far as the federal ADA standards. And so they'll have to fill out an application, get a
a signature from a health provider that confirms they have a disability. And then it's processed by GoApex. So they have to essentially get approval before they can reserve a ride.
And one follow-up on that, if they've already registered through GoWake, is that gonna just kind of grandfather them or pull them into us for GoApex, or do they need to go through that registration process all over again?
So yes and no. GoApex itself doesn't currently operate any ADA paratransit service. So they'll have to apply through GoApex, the GoApex program, to get that. They do offer other services that aren't technically the fixed route ADA complimentary paratransit service. We also offer, we're going to work with them on having regional reciprocity for folks who've already become eligible through like GoCarry or GoTriangle. So, and those are actually operated through MV. So they haven't done, technically GoApex or GoWake Access hasn't operated that service yet. And there's sort of a third component to the launch this summer, which is we're building new ADA compliant bus stops to serve the new route. This is just an example of the work that's been done at the new stop at Chapel Ridge Road. And we worked to make sure that they were all ADA compliant. So that's why you see a lot of concrete work going on around town to make sure that there's an even flat surface for folks to board and alight from the bus. We did send out letters about the construction this spring to over 1,400 residents and property owners. And we only got 8 calls back from that, which is a pretty good sign. And they were mostly clarifying questions about where exactly the stop was going to be installed and things like that. So we answered those. And later on, after service starts, we're also working on another project, which is currently in design phase, to add 4 shelters at stops around town. Those are at West Williams and Upchurch Street, at Peakway and Cambridge Village, at Tingen Road and Peacehaven Place, which is West Haven apartments, and also at James Street and Germain. So those will be coming next year. So although we've been working really hard to get the service up and running, and you'll see those final service agreements at the next council meeting, we're really turning our focus right now to build awareness among residents and community members that the service is coming, and that they are aware that there's a brand called GoApex and things like that. So we've been at a few town events. This photo is from Peak Fest, and we've been developing some promotional materials to get the word out, and I'll also be personally going around to businesses to develop or to distribute some materials, and I'll also be doing some pop-up events around town where I just basically have a table where I try to get people to learn more about GoApex. So that'll be the plan for this summer. So I know there's a lot going on right now, but I wanted to emphasize the fact that this service is really years in the making. And it's been through the dedication of staff, leadership, and also a pretty dedicated group of volunteers who have helped us get to this point. And I wanted to highlight the Transit Advisory Committee. They've actually been meeting for almost 5 years since we started the Advanced Apex process, when we realized in the town that we needed to start, I guess, digging a little deeper on what transit needs we had. And they helped work through the circulator study that led to GoApex Route 1. And they've spent time reaching out to members of the community, attending events, volunteering their time. And we really appreciate the work that they've done. And those folks are listed here. And we also have some staff members who act as advisors and resources for that group. They really bring a wide range of experience and skill sets that I think is really good, because it brings another perspective to the staff perspective. as far as transit planning goes. One thing that the group continues to work on is improvements to the experience of transit in town. And so one thing that we're working with a few members of the Transit Advisory Committee, as well as a few members of the Public Art Committee on, is to bring art to bus stops. So we've got a project in the works to bring sidewalk art to select bus stops this coming spring. And I wanted to give a heads up to you all, because what we're planning to do is put out a public survey this summer to get sort of an idea of what the community would like to see in their sidewalk art, and any concerns or questions they might have before we actually issue a call for artists to get, hopefully local artists, to come and paint those sidewalks. And that takes a little bit of time, just because we want to make sure we follow the public art policy in town, as well as the NCDOT public art in the right-of-way policy, which requires a review by NCDOT. So if you have any questions about that, I can answer those too, but otherwise you can move on and I can pass it over to Shannon.
I know you probably said this, but how many bus stops again, or will there be?
So we're building 38 new bus stops, but there are actually more bus stops in town, because there's already some that are already served by Go Triangle and Go Carry.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass it to Shannon.
All right, thanks, Katie. You here in the back? Yeah, okay, thanks. That was a little quiet. So next part of the presentation is related to the S-Line Transit-Oriented Development, or TOD study. Just a brief overview. This is a study that is being led by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. We are participating along with 6 other communities along this 95-mile future passenger rail corridor. So the participating communities go as far south as Sanford and as far north as Norlina. The purpose of this study is to help all of these communities prepare for future passenger rail by looking at development. Specifically, the scope will evaluate market conditions for development, affordable housing, multimodal connections and opportunities, as well as regulatory conditions. Each recommendation will be tailored to the specific community along the corridor. And the added benefit of us participating, and this resonates with the lessons learned from the Florida trip as well, is it brings GoApex to the table for all of these conversations about future rail. TOD study schedule is shown on the slide. The background work, data collection really began last August. Diane Kin, Russell Dalton, and myself serve on the technical committee. Sean Purvis and Mr. Gantz serve on the advisory committee. So we've been meeting regularly with this group throughout the time. Consultant team is working on a readiness report, market study, and vision summary. We have not yet received those, so that's something that we'll be receiving soon. They are preparing this week for workshops in each community and expect to wrap up in December of this year with recommendations. This is a save the date. You have one in your goodie bag if you want to grab one on your way out today. It's a GoApex bag. You saw it on the slide. We have a workshop this Thursday in this room. It is open to the public. The session from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock is a working session. That's when the consultant team will be here actively working, gathering input from anyone who stops by. The presentation of results, the open house, is the same evening from 5:30 to 7, same place. And that's also formatted as a drop-in, so come anytime in that window. So there's some other S-Line related news I like to cover. The first is DOT is actively moving on next steps. So they pursued a RAISE grant that we supported. We expect to hear the results, hopefully August timeframe. This RAISE grant would allow NCDOT to study mobility hubs in each of those same communities. For us, it would mean a feasibility study of our future mobility hub. So what that is a train station that connects to bus, that connects to bike, to walking. It is intended to convey a sense of place, to be human focused. You'll see some examples in the slides at the end. But that's the next step for us. So we will keep you updated based on what happens with that award. And then I did want to touch on this. You probably saw it in the news. NCDOT was also successful in getting $58 million in federal funds, the largest CRISI grant across the country, for moving forward engineering and design of the S line from Raleigh north. So don't feel left out. This is a section that has been studied for years at this point. They had already completed the environmental impact statement. This is part of the high-speed rail corridor that will allow for faster rail trips to DC, to New York, to Richmond. It is intercity rail, but it's also part of the future commuter rail corridor, so helps to move along that Wake Forest to Sanford rail service. So any questions about the S-Line TOD study?
Yeah, what are our actual prospects of being included? You said earlier it gives us a seat at the table. What should I read into that? Is that like, is it a big seat? Is it in the back of the room? Or is it like probably going to happen as long as we're playing ball here for a while?
So, I mean, I will get into this a little bit more too with the lessons learned.
Okay.
The commuter rail is on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan as well as our local plan. NCDOT is inviting us at this point to participate in all of these studies. So I think as long as we continue to, take that seat, it's very likely that Apex will continue to be a part of this moving forward. As far as timeline, how quickly things move, we don't know that at this time.
Would you have any estimations at all on timeline, or just wouldn't even want to guesstimate?
Well, I think it would be discouraging if you looked at how long it took for the northern part of the corridor, the Raleigh north, to get moving. But there's more federal funding than ever before for rail service. And I've never seen things move forward this quickly, but I can't give you like a number of years.
Is that in part because of the federal infrastructure plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mayor Pete is the president's now the DOT administrator. And so I think he's probably my impression he's the most pro, and President Biden as well. They're the most pro like train and transportation, non-car transportation, I think maybe ever. And so I think there's a lot of interest policy-wise too in that front. I perceive that at least to be the case.
There's also really an incredible team working at NCDOT right now on moving this forward. So I definitely want to, give them credit for everything that they're doing. They're finding a lot of success in these pursuits. Okay, so the last part of this presentation is about the Regional Transportation Alliance, RTA, Transportation Leadership Tour that was in South Florida. And so first, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to go. It was an incredible trip. RTA packed the agenda from 7:30 to 8 every day. We were constantly listening to speakers. The lessons learned that I've distilled into 4, it just barely touches the surface of what we covered. So there was a lot of content. So first of all, we covered this. I think number 1 lesson learned is participate, sit at this table, continue to be involved. Probably recognize a lot of the people in these pictures. Got the Secretary of Transportation, commissioners, mayors, rail director. It's important just for us to show up and show Apex is interested. We want to be a part of this. And I think we did a better job than just showing up, but being there definitely helped.
Also jokes. It was great. Just kidding.
And this this kind of covers what we've already talked about, these grant pursuits. I really feel like DOT is kind of pulling the chair out for us right now. And hopefully we can continue to put that local commitment forward and participate in these processes. There was a lesson learned from Miami. So during this trip, we experienced privately funded intercity passenger rail. So that's the higher speed city to city rail. That was called Brightline. We also experienced commuter rail. That's a public rail. Buses, people movers, different stations, and public places. Brightline in particular was interesting and kind of reinforced this number one takeaway. You can see kind of barely on that map that they have existing stations in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. They're now building the track to Orlando, and then they'll move on to Tampa. One of those small dots, Avondale, is a community of about 35,000. They advocated for themselves during the process of development of Brightline, and one of the commitments is that Brightline will go back in the second phase and build them their own station. So they won't just be passed by the train, they won't just experience noise and traffic disruption, they'll actually have a station and all of the mobility and economic benefits. So I thought that was very fitting for this lesson. Second takeaway was to foster a shared regional vision. This was originated from a discussion that we had with leadership in Miami. They were talking about lessons learned from their process. They're much further along than we are in North Carolina as far as transit. And they said that it was often messy. You know, their process was often messy. They had a lot of different agencies doing a lot of different things. It was really critical that their MPO kind of bring all these pieces together and that they had a shared regional vision that they were all working toward. I think that there's some additional work that needs to be done here, and I've heard that from several people participating. The first picture there is from the Wake Transit Plan, and you can see that the S line is kind of a dotted line headed toward GoApex and a dotted line headed toward Wake Forest. And a lot of the energy and focus has been on the commuter rail that, you know, is going east-west. I think continuing to bring the S line, the passenger rail into this conversation and advocating that we work toward a shared vision will be important. And the MPO did include that in their recently adopted strategic plan update. So it's not just Wake Transit, it's, you know, the regional plan. Third takeaway is that we need to prepare for really transformational change with rail. And we could see how that occurred in Florida. I already mentioned kind of how the stations were developed in phases there. You can see in the bottom picture, that's one of their future station locations. They're, you know, it's kind of nothing right now except the utility corridor. They're getting ready for TOD there. And so having a plan for that is important. They've experienced expanded job markets, expanded land use. Few numbers taken from one of the Brightline slides. The environmental benefits have been huge. They've generated 10,000 jobs through rail line construction. 64 billion has been inserted into the Florida economy as part of that project. So it's really transformational. And there's some pros and cons that come with it. West Palm Beach in particular has seen a huge economic benefit, but they've also seen their land prices dramatically increase. And affordable housing is a huge issue for them. They cited that their land downtown near their rail is 13 times more valuable per mile than citywide. It's increased by 56% compared to 35% since 2015. So these are the types of things that we need to prepare for. And then the last lesson learned, and to me, the one of the more exciting for us right now, because there's so much that we can actively work on for this in particular, is to make getting from one great place to another simple and enjoyable. I put quotes around this one because I stole it from one of these slides, but it's about both the places, the experience of travel, and the ease of travel. They all are important. This is a picture of one of the Brightline stations, and you can see it. It's very comfortable. I will tell you, they actually have a branded scent in their stations and on their trains. So thinking about all of the senses of travel, to try to encourage people to take the train instead of drive their car. They also have an app. So I mentioned there's, Brightline connects to public bus service, public train service. You can easily find information about all of those through this one app. You can also choose to purchase a ticket just for your public ride or include your last mile ride. And there's options like an individual passenger vehicle to get you from the train station to your job or house, a shared electric shuttle, bike share, scooters, and it's all through that app. The electric shuttle that they connect to is subsidized by local businesses and local government, and they geofence an area around the train station that helps with that last mile connection. So it's a shared ride. It's no cost to the user, and it's offset through advertisements. All electric vehicles. It's just a picture of what I was talking about. This is your last mile trip. You've got the Tesla option, the electric shuttle option you can kind of barely see. Bike share is also right there when you walk out of the mobility hub, and wayfinding. And it looks really nice. So getting to the great places, there were a lot of lessons for us, I felt, in West Palm, and this is where I got this lesson number 4. This is from their downtown vision plan. So, like we created a downtown plan, they also have one. And they had a goal of becoming a 15-minute city where you can get from one great place to another in 15 minutes, and it's enjoyable and simple. They shared they originally had a streetscape that was 72% car for cars, 28% for people. They made some changes in the 90s. They added skinny palm trees because they could do that in Florida. And they left all their parking and left 2 travel lanes. In the 2020s, they further reduced that. They took some parking, they added shady trees, they expanded the sidewalks further. And it was a curbless street. So we got to see how that functioned in person. They're still working on it. You can see that they're constructing the buildings as well as the streetscape. So not quite like us, but that's bike share right there. You can see they have a trolley as well as one of those electric shuttles right downtown. Valet drop off, shade trees, lots of seating, artwork, everything to make it a great place. A different example, this is bigger city, this is Miami. We have a linear park on our land use plan. Their linear park is a little different. It's underneath the rail. They used that space, worked with a nonprofit to create a park and greenway in that space. So you can see the bike-only travel way there. There's seating for people to enjoy. There's actually a gym, and they've employed some of the homeless individuals in that area to help to keep up, and they pay them a salary to keep up the space. It was very exciting. Kids are here playing every day after school. People in the offices come here for lunch. So it's a very active area. And that kind of wraps up the lessons learned. I hope it was helpful. Again, the trip was excellent, so I really appreciate it. And I can try to answer any questions that you have. Or Mr. Gant, if you have anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, real quickly. So I asked Katie to ask Shannon to present this while it was still fresh in our minds, first of all. But second of all, this trip kind of reminded me of the downtown plan we did. And so when I saw that document when it was finished, it was like, okay, that's the future of Apex. That's what we need to do. It was like, that was kind of mind blowing. In the same way, this was kind of mind blowing. I saw the future of how our area can function. Miami and the South Florida was, several years ahead of us, but it was ahead of us both in transit and also car traffic. So I think they've kind of been on the same journey as us, but just further along. But it was so impressive and just visionary, like we were saying, what they had done, and I think was a really great model for what our region can do. And I think everybody, not just me and Shannon, but everybody that was at that event, I think came away thinking like we need to kind of follow this model, and we need to get Apex and the S-Line thing could be an example of what they have there as one of the things. And I think they mentioned S-Line a lot more toward the end of the trip than before the beginning. It was all about the Durham-Raleigh one, which is further along and it will serve a bigger population probably. But the population between Sanford and Henderson up there is growing really fast, especially our part. And Sanford, they're getting really big too. So I think it's well timed to kind of take advantage and serve this growing area as well. So all those things I thought were useful to share with everybody. I didn't want to have it all inside here. So thank you for that.
Quick question about some of our neighbors. I'll ask the Mahaffey question. Is Holly Springs doing anything about this? Have they taken a seat at the table? Fuquay, any of our other kind of neighboring communities? What, if anything, have they done with regard to kind of taking steps forward with this, specifically S-Line, but kind of this larger vision as well?
Mm-hmm. So they're not directly along the rail corridor, so they have not participated in these studies. However, Katie and I have talked with Holly Springs. Really, the future station that we show in Viridia on our transit plan map would probably be their station as well. And so thinking about that as a place where the region comes, we've definitely discussed it one-on-one. Holly Springs and Fuquay are both part of the Transit Advisory Committee for the Wake Transit Plan. So they have actively been engaged in those conversations.
One comment I had about that is, Apex, I think, is blessed geographically with good roads nearby. I think that's what kind of spurred on some of the growth in front of Holly Springs and these areas with 64, 55, 540 now. I got 540 is going to go through Holly Springs too, but it really goes through Apex the most. And I think in the same way, I think we'll start thinking about that train line as a way we're blessed beyond that. And that was kind of why we're here to begin with the history of Apex developing where it did because of the train line. But I think we're really going to, my guess is, no offense to them, but we're going to just crush them in terms of the future development because of where we are located on the roads and now this train line. I think it's going to be hard for them to keep up, to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree that, we're kind of, of the many blessings that we have as a community, our road infrastructure, rail infrastructure, kind of how all that's intersecting. Yeah, we're in a great place. But the reason why I ask about Holly Springs and Fuquay is because, as we start looking at regional approaches, sometimes it's those who are not as blessed that will either be the distractor or the force that creates kind of the motivation to make things happen. So just didn't know whether or not they've been on where they're at in terms of kind of how they're viewing this long term, and if maybe it's appropriate for us to start thinking in terms of how do we get them on board as regional partners before it becomes too late.
Yep. So the most recent conversation we had with staff was about their transportation plan update and looking at the transit element of it and really thinking about how buses could connect from Holly Springs to Apex to future rail. So we're starting to have those types of conversations, but there hasn't been as many staff available for them to participate.
Oh, understand.
Hey, Shannon, Has there been discussions with the Wake Transit folks to think about it? Let's say this does get built, this S line, and becomes a really nice way to get into Raleigh from here, whether those communities will be served by trying to get them to here, or is it going to be, do you think more likely try to get them from Holly Springs and Fuquay up to Raleigh directly with a BRT or something? I mean, has there been discussion about, is it going to, will the spoke be Apex or will the spoke be Raleigh, and what that all entails?
So at this point, as far as transit plans, I would say the hubs are Raleigh, Cary, and the stations there. And we're more on the spoke. So Holly Springs would be through Apex into Cary and Raleigh.
Okay.
And there, to date, has been little connectivity kind of east to west across southern Wake County in any plans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And Katie.
Okay, so that'll conclude our portion on transit. Very much so, thank you, and Shannon. Questions. So lots of exciting stuff to come. So next we move to some updates on our ARPA funds and where we are in the plan.